Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News chief political anchor Bret Baier.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is calling a Monday afternoon phone call with President Trump productive following the fatal shooting in Minneapolis by an ICE agent. In the wake of that call, Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino has left his position as Border Control Commander at Large. Border Czar Tom Homan is now expected to take the lead on the ground in Minneapolis. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had this to say.
Border Czar Homan is in a unique position to drop everything and go to Minnesota to continue having these productive conversations with state and local officials. And I know that he's catching a plane in just a few hours to do just that at the request of the president.
Meanwhile, the clock is ticking on another government shutdown, possibly. This one is centered on DHS funding, as President Trump spent Tuesday in Iowa pushing his economic agenda. As always, lots to discuss this week. Joining me now, host of the Trey Gowdy podcast, Trey Gowdy, Fox News senior political analyst Juan Williams, and our senior White House correspondent, anchor of the Sunday briefing, Jacqui Heinrich. Jacqui, let me start with you. Obviously, the pitch in Iowa is more about affordability and how the economy is doing. But hanging over all of this week is obviously the situation in Minnesota and what's happening inside DHS as far as who's got the upper hand.
Yeah, it's the story the whole country is talking about. And I think one of the reasons why it has continued to sort of drag on is there's a tacit admission in the president's switch out of, the staffing in Minneapolis, sending Tom Homan, pulling Bovino out, and, sort of distancing themselves, the White House, from the statements that Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller said. They're doing all of that, but they're not articulating why that had to happen. They don't want to give an inch to the critics and acknowledge that some of the statements that happened in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, calling Alex Pretti an assassin, a domestic terrorist, shouldn't have happened. No one will just sort of call a spade and let the story continue. The president's talking right now, doing a live interview, and is being asked, is this a pullback? And I think the dance of trying to articulate why these changes have happened without just noting this was a problem is a little bit harder to execute. And so that's why it's going into day 2, 3, 4. And the other turn here this afternoon is that the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, seems to be rejecting the offer from the White House to they said, look, cooperate with us on criminal illegal aliens, and we will reduce the footprint of federal agents in the region. And Frey put out a tweet saying, we do not and will not enforce federal immigration law. I asked the White House for a statement on that because it looks like basically a rejection of the offer, and haven't heard back yet. But a lot of reaction coming in from Democrats over that statement from Frey and how that might be not the best politics for 2028 for Dems either.
Yeah, Trey, here's the issue. I mean, we can go down this investigation and we can go down the shooting and what people see about what happened and didn't happen. And clearly, there are a lot of people who look at that and say it shouldn't have happened, either from the shooter or from the person with the gun, Pretti, and you can go down all those roads, and that investigation continues. But the bottom line here is that now we think that local and state authorities are going to work with ICE. At least that's what was signaled. But the big question is, are they going to let illegal immigrants who are in jails, arrested for crimes, and give them over to ICE or not?
Bret, I would think, I cannot believe that is Mayor Frey's position. That would be an 80-20 issue. That would be overwhelmingly bipartisan to get rid of violent offenders who are unlawfully in this country. So for Democrats to have an advantage like they have with this video and to squander it by saying, no, we won't just accept Tom Homan, who was a local cop who worked under President Obama. We want to go back to the days where we ignore federal immigration law. He is blowing a political opportunity here. And I hate to put it that way because two people have lost their lives, in Renee Good and Alex Pretti. But the politics of it is this is a wonderful opportunity for Democrats who've been underwater on immigration. He will blow it if he keeps that position of protecting criminal aliens.
Yeah. And Juan, it is an 80-20 issue if you phrase it that way. Now, if you phrase it about, the tactics being used by ICE and if other people get rounded up with that. But if you strictly asked about taking criminal illegal immigrants off the streets, it is 80-20. The other question is about the political side of this. If Democrats are blocking, and it does go to another government shutdown, we saw the last one at 43 days, and they're blocking DHS funding because they're going to say, we're not giving money to ICE. Meanwhile, ICE has been already funded through 2029, and the money you would be taking away is for basically TSA or FEMA. That could backfire too.
Yeah, I mean, in the short run, just the fact that, we're in the midst of some rough weather here, especially in the Northeast, and things like the airports and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency Administration, they could all be impacted. So there would be some potential blowback for the Democrats. But let me offer a different perspective than my colleagues and say that, first, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, wrote in this morning's Wall Street Journal that in no case, and I'm just quoting what the man said here. He said, in no case has the Minnesota Department of Corrections refused to release anybody to ICE. He said, quote, yet that lie persists. So, if what he's saying is true, if what he wrote in black and white in the Wall Street Journal is true, he's saying that, this is something that's being foisted as a phony argument by the administration to detract from what I think is the real issue. I think it's the real reason that everybody in the country is talking about it, is that you've seen videotape taken on these cell phones that are omnipresent of people who look like they were unjustly executed by ICE. So what you get here is a situation where, coming back to something Jacqui touched on, everybody around is talking about it, not just people like the four of us who are so into politics, but you get sort of people who have a low proclivity to pick up a paper or listen, and they are talking about what's going on in Minnesota. And I think that's very difficult for the Trump administration. I suspect that their attitude is, if we have pulled Greg Bovino, that's a sign that we're trying to de-escalate. And I think that for them, it's very important to say that they are taking a step. They're not going to try to please their antagonist on the left, but they want to be clear to the independents, especially as you go towards those midterms, that they understand that there have been some problems here.
Yeah, 100%. And you can see that in how President Trump put Holman on the ground, how he says Holman will report directly to him. And Holman obviously is a guy who, as we've noted, received an award from President Obama and was lauded for his efforts in immigration enforcement during the Obama years. Jacqui, it's, as they're trying to turn the page and talk about other things, it seems pretty impossible because this story is kind of overwhelming a lot of the oxygen.
Yeah, I don't see it ending anytime soon, in part because you got this government funding deadline coming up. You also, and I think this might be a trickier issue for members of Congress, have a budding effort in the House to impeach Kristi Noem. And I think, vulnerable Republicans might be put in a position where that's a hard thing to try to defend, even if you don't want to, go against the president right ahead of a primary election season or whatever it is. A number of these people, even in safer districts, had voiced some, uneasiness with the statements that she put out. And we are starting to see also the blame game begin. There was an Axios report that what she said actually came from Stephen Miller. And, you wonder where that reporting comes from and who wants it out. But I think the story is going to continue, certainly because Congress wants it to continue, both as it pertains to the funding fight and also this Noem impeachment situation. But to Juan's point, and this is another thing I think Democrats need to keep in mind, Tim Walz is being a little too cute by half with his statement there. And yes, the prisons honor ICE detainers. They transfer convicted criminal aliens after they serve their sentence. But the sanctuary city fights are over people that are in county and city jails
being held and they have an ICE detainer.
And they have an ICE detainer. Even California, as our own Bill Malugin pointed out, even California's prisons honor ICE detainers, the same type that Walz is referencing. But that's not to suggest that there isn't a single person that ICE doesn't want, or that ICE wants in Minnesota that they can't get their hands on. That's just not true. And I think that they have to figure out, the leadership in that state, how they're going to respond to this White House offer, which is still on the table. Look, give us the bad guys that we want, and we will reduce the footprint here, the federal agents. The surge will go away. This could be very easy. And I think they haven't figured out the answer to that yet either. And I don't think that they know what their base wants from them, because a lot of Democrats believe that, the base wants them to just keep fighting Trump. But immigration, the last election was won on immigration too. So this is going to be a hard nut for them to crack as well.
Panel, we'll hold it right there.
This is not in defense of the actions against Renee Good and the shooting of Alex Pretti, but there is a network of agitators and paid protesters that, when you followed the money, and Fox Digital had a pretty detailed piece about some of this, it's pretty extensive, what is trying to stir the pot to get in the middle of these ICE operations.
No doubt, Bret. Being a law enforcement officer is arguably the toughest job in the world. You have to show restraint. You have to have awful things said to you. But you know that when you take the oath. And that it is a very, very hard job. I am incredibly pro law enforcement. That's why I was a prosecutor. But yet I had to prosecute cops because some of them do things that cross the line. I'm not prejudging these cases, but the one with Pretti, it does not help when you call the victim a domestic terrorist. It does not help when you say he was brandishing a weapon when the whole world can see he was not. So I wish President Trump remarkably, Bret, I say remarkably, you've been around him privately. I've been around him privately some. He said he can see both sides, even of the Renee Good shooting, which is a closer justified shooting than Pretti. But his subordinates are not saying that. Their language is much more incendiary than the president's.
Yeah, that's true. Meantime, really quickly about what we see overseas. Venezuela, we don't have a real sense of what's next, other than the president says Delcy Rodriguez, the current president, is working collaboratively, releasing American prisoners, other prisoners, and essentially giving us oil. On Iran, we now have a carrier battle group in position. I'm told that Israel has defenses. Juan, that was part of the holdup last time, is some of the Patriot batteries, etc. The question is whether Iran wants to make a deal, as the president says, or they, the numbers of protesters that have been killed, and some human rights groups have it up to 30,000, gets to the point where he drew a red line and needs to follow through.
Well, from what we can understand, it was Israeli intelligence as well as Saudi, United Arab Emirates, and others, even some in Syria, who advised the president not to go in earlier. And then there was the report that the Iranians had said that they had stopped the killing. I think the president said that they were set to hang hundreds of people and didn't do it. But as you have just wisely pointed out, Bret, the positioning of U.S. military assets would indicate that there is something at play here. It's just uncertain as to why he would make the move now. Clearly, the people who have been monitoring the situation believe that the Iranians have been killing people and have continued to kill people. But the president showed some restraint earlier for some reason. And you've got to understand exactly how much of an explosive situation the Middle East continues to be. We've heard all the talk about the president creating a Middle East peace board and all that. But the fact is, if you go in and destabilize the Iranian regime, what do you get? And do you then have to expect that Israel and some of the Arab neighbors would have to step in? And if they do, then you get into lots of really difficult territory, Shia versus Shiite in terms of the Muslim community, long-standing antagonisms. And is that really, what America wants? The president's in Iowa today, as you guys have mentioned. And I think lots of people on the Republican side feel that he has been too involved around the world instead of paying attention to domestic issues like affordability.
Mm-hmm. Jacqui, last thing. I think when I talk to experts that they are above 50%, that this is still going to happen.
On Iran?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to know when something like that's going to happen, especially because, this is a president who the last time he did something in Iran, when he sent the B-2 bombers to obliterate the nuclear facilities, he let the whole world believe that he was going to give himself a 2-week window to make that call. And he had, already at that point when he made that statement, decided he was going to do it, and 30 hours later sent the planes. So it's hard to know. I think we are closer to knowing now that you've got the assets in the region, should he decide he wants to use them. What I don't understand is why he believes that Iran wants to make a deal. You don't hear that from people around him, which is curious to me as a person who covers him, including, his current or former advisors. And so why he gets the sense that Iran definitely wants to make a deal, a nuclear deal, something that has not happened before, and there's a lot of question, whether they mean it now or they just want to get the dogs called off of them. I don't know the answer to that, and he doesn't seem to want to reveal his cards on that. So we just have to sort of look to him for signals on where this is headed. But those closest to him also say that he's a man of his word, and he promised that he would, show up for those protesters, and they believe that he's going to make good on that because the regime did kill people violently.
Yeah. We shall see. There's a lot of moving parts, both domestically and internationally. Panel, as always, thank you. Now for a bit of history. On this day in 1971, a Saturn V rocket roared off the pad at Cape Canaveral carrying the crew of Apollo 14. It was the third mission to reach the moon and the first to touch down in the lunar highlands. The crew didn't come back empty-handed either. They brought home more than 90 pounds of rock samples and vital new maps of the lunar surface. The mission ended 9 days later with a safe splashdown in the Pacific, just off the coast of Samoa. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download your favorite podcast. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. For Trey, Juan, and Jacqui, I'm Bret Baier. We'll see you next time.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.